All right, so for this session, I kind of want to do a soft skills one. So I'm sure some of you have heard me say it before. So are we recording? Yeah, we're recording. So the thing about engineers that you guys are very good on the technical side. Very, very good on the technical side. Hey Fagoni, hey Jay. So what we see a lot of times, especially for higher level roles. So Rad, this is important for you, for example, because we're applying to more senior roles, behavioral questions start to matter more. And so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do SQL, don't do Python, right? Study for all those things, but being able to pass the behavioral round, especially in the US where it's a lot, I know it's different in different cultures, by the way. I think like India, for example, it might be very, very technical, very technically heavy. Um, and they get in the weeds on the details. In the US, it's more 50-50. They do make a decision based on like your behavioral questions, like tell me about a time when you blah, 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 right? Your soft skills, your communication, right? And so what I want to do for today, I want to make it a little more interactive. So I want to go over a resume, maybe even a behavioral question story, and really tap into those two parts and the leadership style as well. Um, and so again, I think we have people of all levels here, but I want to make sure I'm covering, if you're a senior, if you're not, hey Shelby. Um, and so I know like Shelby and I, for example, have gone through a lot of behavioral questions, a lot of leadership questions. So let's do this. Um, first serve, first come, first serve. Put a one in the chat if you want us to take a look at your resume or a behavioral story, whatever the case is, and we're going to do it live. So let's see who wants to step up? Rad, you were first. All right, let's do it. I think you have my email address, chris@dataengineeracademy.com. Go ahead and either send your resume or send your behavioral questions, and let's dissect it and let me know if there's something specific you want. And then we'll go down the line and I'll see if I can go through Cleo and Beatrice as well. No worries at all, Rad. You are muted though. That's number 6. Brave people. Shelby, stop it. It's so interesting, by the way. The camera being off is such an interesting thing. Again, it goes back to like engineers, right? We're very engineering analytical people. It's so interesting to me because if you go to like coaching sessions with like entrepreneurs, they're crazy. They all have the camera off. We have different problems there where it's like we have to tell people like put like your mute button on because 17 people are talking at the same time. So it's always funny to me that it's a bunch of different things. All right.
I sent my resume, but for the behavior question, I don't know. Please pick, and I want to be ready for it.
Cool, cool, cool. All right. So is this your updated resume, Brad?
Yes, it has a date.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So let's go through it. And I want to make it interactive. I want to know if there's any questions. So first off, let me start off by saying everybody's in a different spot. We have people that are fully transitioning. We have people like Rad who has some relevant experience. We have people who have 15, 20 years of experience, right? So don't worry so much about uh, the the meat of it. We just want to let you know what recruiters are looking at on the other side. So right off the bat, I can tell Rad has gone through the training and most of you should have, because again, the little secrets there is that this part right here is called above the fold, right? So who knows what above the fold is? You can put a one in the chat. I want to make it as lively as possible. I want to know, basically, I want to get feedback to understand if I'm getting through you guys instead of just talking at you guys. So put a one in the chat. Even better if you want to put your hand up, ask a question, turn on the camera and shout at me, whatever the case is. So above the fold, recruiters don't look at the bottom half of the resume. They've done a lot of eye tracking software tests. So this part right here. So, and again, it's why the whole, keep your resume to one page thing is really important. So that's a little feedback for you, Rad. Again, it doesn't matter too much, but yeah, you can rest assured they're not looking down at this part. Or this part. So it's good that you have that in the bottom, but they're really looking at this part. So they're looking for two things. Number one, are you going to fit the requirement for the technical skills, right? So by the way, this is the recruiter round. The machine learning, yeah, exactly, Daniel. The machine learning um, uh, uh, algorithms are going to detect the keywords. But let's assume you get past that, right? Let's assume a recruiter is looking at you. Oftentimes, engineers forget this. Remember, the recruiters are not technical. The recruiters are not technical. So you want to make their life as easy as possible by doing something like this so that they can literally just match it to the job description. And you have to remember, somebody technical wrote the job description. Somebody not technical is deciding whether you even make it past the first round, right? So you have to make it obvious, just like this, as to if you even have the technical chops or knowledge to make it past the first round. Another mistake I see people doing, and so Rad, good job here. Instead of just saying, I know AWS, Rad is going in there and saying, hey, these are the things in AWS that I know. Recruiters are not dumb, right? So if you have, hey, I know AWS here, they're going to be like, great, this guy did a certificate or did a 5-second course on AWS and put on his resume. But when you're able to show specificity, even better. So like the more you can stack this up and overwhelm them, the better this top half of the resume is going to be. And then it's something called congruency. And so this is something rad. When we start to apply for you, this is something we're going to do here. So you see the tools that you have here. We got to put them in the bullet points because, again, going back to congruency, they can tell when you're just putting things in there to put it in there versus when you've actually worked on it. So there's ways to do it that you're not technically lying. But again, we want to get you to a point where you actually know what it is you're talking about so that you feel comfortable enough to put it in your bullet points. And so we'll work on that when we start to apply for you to increase your chances of getting a job interview. But with that said, above the fold, first 50% of the resume, this is the most important part right here. Your most recent experience. And again, I get some people might not have any experience. That's totally okay. Don't get overwhelmed. But for those of you that do, leverage the hell out of it. Honestly, for you, I would even like look at it this way. You're probably using up way too much space here. Like for you, this part might even be a little longer. Now, you used to work at Amazon, so that's actually more impressive. So you kind of have a different situation where actually that's okay because you want them to see your Amazon experience. Um, so I actually like the way you've structured it. So I can tell you worked through it and worked through it with Malad, I'm assuming.
Uh, yes, I wanted to say something else that there are 2 points. One is that a lot, almost everything I say, maybe except for the R and HTML, that is listed in the key skills, is listed in the key bullet points as well. And maybe I'm mistaking about the R and HTML. They are listed somewhere. And also, I use the hack to find out to make sure all of the key skills are listed. I gave all of the bullet points to ChatGPT and said, okay, this is the bullet points. These are my key skills. Please
Yeah.
tell me if I'm missing anything.
Yep.
And
No,
it
that's
look at
I
it, okay, you are missing this, and because it's really hard to find out to make sure you're not missing anything or you're not repeating something.
Yeah, and I love that. Use ChatGPT or AI as much as you can to make sure you're not missing anything. We have some recordings in the background of how to use stuff like that. So we'll post it soon. But this one is the most unethical I've found. I've found like if you have a job description, people will copy and paste the entire job description, put it at the bottom of their resume, and then white out the text so it doesn't show up. That way, you're basically copying the whole job description forward and you're getting through all the machine learning, right? So your resume, your recruiter is actually looking at it. So That's kind of the most unethical way to do it, but you want to make sure it's also like up here because then you'll get past the machine, but not the recruiter, right? So that's a little side hack for all you guys, but use at will, use at your own discretion. And then let's see, any questions so far? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, feel free to ask questions at any point too. Just go ahead and drop it in the chat. But the other thing I would say here, good job of quantifying it. Again, I've said this before. The reason the saying, one picture is worth 1,000 words is because the human brain processes images first, numbers second, and then words third. So you really want to be able to use as many numbers as possible in here because it'll quantify your impact. Again, it goes back to the STAR method, right? That R in STAR, you're quantifying your impact. You want it to be congruent both in your behaviorals and your resume. So it really becomes fairly easy to just kind of not copy and paste, but stay congruent there. And so
Can I ask one question, Chris?
absolutely, go for it.
With this resume, I'm mostly getting calls for data analyst, and I don't want to get those. And I have to rely on me telling recruiters one by one that I'm not very interested in data analyst positions. I want to transition to data engineer, and they see that I have all of the skills, and they say, okay, we'll get back to you with the data engineer.
Yeah.
So few
So
calls for data engineer.
yeah, here's a few things you can do. Again, don't lie, but also little white truths are not that big a deal. I know for a fact, for example, that you were doing engineer work at Amazon as a BIA. So go ahead and just change this analyst to an engineer. That's one thing we can see that affects it because again, a lot of recruiters don't actually know what IAM, DBT, and SQS are, but they can say, oh, he's been an engineer, right? So again, going back to like, how are the recruiters thinking? You have to keep that in mind. So that's number one. Number two, again, this is where this kind of stuff, they're looking, oh, wait a second, why does a manager want to be why does the manager want to be a engineer? That's another thing that could be hurting you here. Now, with that said, it goes back to what I said in the beginning, right? You have AWS here and all that good stuff, which is great, but it's not congruent in your experience, right? That's not in your experience. So they're probably being like, oh, he probably can do data analyst work because he uses Power BI, because he's tracking KPIs, right? Because he's using Python here, because he's using Tableau here, right? So again, this is a great start, but this is also just as important. And that's what's going to make the recruiter feel like, he can do data engineering work, he cannot. Because again, you have done data engineering work, right? I know for a fact at Amazon, you were doing that there. Now you just have to sell it a little better, if that makes sense. Are you reaching out to recruiters?
No, I just put my resume on Monsters,
Got
and
it. Reach out to
that's
recruiters
it.
too. Yeah, talking to a human is always the best way to get a job. That's why when we start to apply for you guys as clients, we don't just
Mhm.
apply to jobs, then we also have our team reaching out to recruiters and trying to reverse engineer who is the recruiter that is responsible for that job. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, then you can always like if the resume doesn't get you an application, you can always ask the recruiter like, hey, do you have any other openings? Hey, can you introduce me to somebody? Blah blah blah. So going through a human is always by far the best route you can go, which is why we work so much to partner with recruiters so that we can get you that human touch. Because
That's
again, just applying to Monster, you're gonna be going through 500 or 1,000 people that you're competing with. Now, trust me, I've seen 1,000 resumes of people that didn't become clients. You guys have way better resumes, so I'm not too worried in terms of that. But still, you're dealing with a volume game, so recruiters have to like scrape through a bunch of garbage to find the diamonds in the rough, which is what you guys are. But
Chris, you told me something that was really interesting. You said the business intelligence analyst is the recruiter is not very technical, and if I put engineer there, that would be, help my chances. And I totally agree. And as for the current position, what do you suggest I change it to? Because I was under the impression that the product manager, is a good thing, but now I understand that
I would do
the
engineer. I would do engineer. I would do BIE for both.
okay, business
Yeah.
intelligence
Because
engineer.
it sounds like you were a manager here, but you were also coding, right?
Yes, I'm not a manager. It's just the empty slots for the headcount that they had was open for the product manager at the time, and they
I would go engineer. Yeah, I would go engineer
yeah.
for both. I would go engineer for both. Now here's another tip, because I know Rad, you haven't upgraded yet. So here's another tip. When you reach out to the recruiters, because I see somebody asking for that. Rahman was like, what's the best way to reach out to recruiters? Here's the thing, you can do LinkedIn. The problem with LinkedIn is that it limits you to 200 per week. Now, because you can use bots and reach out to recruiters, by the way, look up something called Wallaxy and LinkedIn Navigator. Now, again, that's the paid version, but you can reach out to 200 recruiters per week. Now, with that said, if you don't want to pay, you can use software. So let's say I apply to Facebook. I can in San Diego. I can look up Facebook recruiter on LinkedIn in San Diego, get the person's name, and then use a tool like Apollo.io to get that email and then reach out to the recruiter. Now, here's where it gets crazy. For you, Rad, specifically, when you reach out to those recruiters via email, and again, we do this all for you, right, as part of our upgrade. When you do that, you have to put in your job in your subject line, hey, I'm an Amazon, business intelligence engineer. When recruiters see that, you're going to get a much, much higher open rate. And so that's the stuff we're working on in the back end too, so that we can track those open rates by the recruiters. But yeah, again, because now you're getting in the realm of like marketing and sales, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what you're kind of doing to these companies. But since you worked at Amazon, use it, use and abuse it, right? So, because I know Rahman was asking best way to reach that. Um, but yeah, go BIE for now. I think that should help. Is there a way to be specific on the job role to tweak your resume to fit that specific? Yeah, it's a good question. That's one thing we're actually finding, Joseph. The more you can modulate each resume or each job description, the higher a chance you'll get. And so again, going back to something I want to work on is how we can use AI to modulate your resume a little bit based on each job description. That way, each application you're sending out is actually customized. It's way too hard to do that manually right now. But if there are jobs, like I wouldn't recommend you do it for 200 jobs, but if there's like 5 dream jobs that you have, I would spend the time and effort to do that there. And like Brad said, ask ChatGPT to confirm, like, hey, does this fulfill all the requirements? Or ask one of us, because it's worth doing, but it's very time consuming. So do it for 5, don't do it for 500, if that makes sense. Because you also want to be able to hit scale. Use Auto, by the way, for those of you not having us apply, use Auto. Don't use LinkedIn. This is Auto.com. LinkedIn, by the way, LinkedIn is recycles job posts. So LinkedIn will give you old job posts and will have a much lower conversion rate. The nicher of the job board you can go, the more likely you're gonna have, the more likely you will have success. So Auto, for example, is paid on the company side. So if companies have to pay someone to post a job description, those jobs are fresher because companies aren't gonna, because LinkedIn will just recycle old job posts, or companies will post it because it's free. But when you have to pay, companies aren't gonna pay unless they're actually serious about it. So it's insane. Our like conversion rate, we basically don't really find that many job interviews for clients on LinkedIn anymore. It's absolutely insane. So the niche of the job board you can go, the better. Um, is it okay to guess on metrics if you don't have them? Chris, give me an example of what you're talking about. Because here's the thing, you always have them. You always have them. Is it okay to guess? Yes, right? If you have an idea, put something realistic, right? I think I had somebody we did a typo and he was saying like, yeah, I increased revenue by like $1 trillion. And I'm like, okay, you gotta, you gotta watch out for typos, man. But other than that, don't worry about your metrics if you like, guesstimate, um, estimate and guess. But with that said, guessing on metrics is a different question than saying, I don't think I have metrics for whatever role you did. Chances are you did. So if there's something specific, Chris, like a line in your resume, just go ahead and drop it in there, um, and go for it. What is the website you're referring to? Ada. Thank you, Isaiah. Let me type it in there. Yeah. So again, you don't have to do this. We'll apply for you, on Ada, but yeah, LinkedIn has been not the friendliest thing. Daniel, how important is it to have Power BI skills? At least one out of every 2 jobs I apply to. Power BI seems like one of the least powerful, sophisticated tools. Yeah, it's not really Power BI necessarily that you need to know. It's a visualization tool. So again, Daniel, remind me what kind of roles are you going for? Are you going for DA or DE? But it's more visualizations. Um, if you have Tableau or Mode or QuickSight, it's probably good enough. There are some companies that are going to be a little anal about specific tools, but like that's 10 to 20%, right? It's not going to be the majority. Um, Now, with that said, if you don't have any visualization tools, that will probably come and bite you in the butt. But again, it goes back to like, recruiters, they're just looking for keywords. Machine learning algorithms are looking for keywords. So yeah, that's how I would agree with you that Power BI is not. Mode, to me, Mode has been the best thing to use in terms of visualization tools. Um,
Right on. Thanks for answering that. I just asked another question real quick, related to what you just said.
What if instead you input a bunch of general keywords and phrases and white out those? So much are, yeah, yeah, same thing. Yeah. The whiting out. Again, we haven't done it because we want to do this ethically and we want to do this the right way. But if anyone here does it where they're inputting whatever keywords or whatever in here and whiting it out and applying and you're just seeing like massive success rates, let me know, please. Let me or my team know because that would be amazing. So, but again, it makes sense. Remember, they'll pass the machine learning round. It may not pass the recruiter round. So you still have to, like, what you visually present to the recruiter still needs to be on par with what they want to check mark. So anything else? Anything else? Cool, cool, cool. Let's move on then to, well, let me see if there's any more nuggets here. Yeah, like I said, for you, Brad, the biggest thing is going to be working with our team to input these in here. So if you want to do another project or so, that can help. But yeah, we did this recently with Shelby. We changed her job title. I think she got like 3 interviews in a week. So I think that's going to be important to you, important for you as well. But awesome. So let's move on. Let's move on to BQ, behavioral questions. For somebody who has some sort of um, behavioral question stories, go ahead and put a 1 in the chat, and let's see who we can dissect. Yeah, Isaiah, it could be either both. You can have a project side section, or you can have a interweaved in your bullet point. It's more or less a white lie, to be completely honest, but companies don't really care as much. Yeah, Chris, go ahead and email me your BQ. As long as you actually know what you're doing and can do it. Now, again, there is a line. If you're applying for like a staff engineer role, then you actually need to know your stuff inside and out. So, but most of you, I don't think are really going for that. I think most of you are just trying to get your foot in the door. So let's see. Shelby, when are your interviews this week?
I have a recruiter round Friday, and then there is a SQL round, which I haven't scheduled yet. and there is one on Monday, one another recruiter round on Monday.
Got it.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
those two titles changing did bring results. Like I was so stressed. Why I'm not getting
Yeah,
response.
connect. That's another thing for everybody. When you guys do get interviews, like let us know. Right? It's hectic for us to kind of keep up with everyone and everything and every application. So just let us know, because in a situation like Shelby, where she has 3 interviews in like 10 days, like we want to be able to stack up any mock interviews right beforehand or fix any things. Because here's the thing, the reason you may not pass interviews oftentimes tends to be the same reason, right? So I worked with a guy who had like 5 rejections in a row before he started working with us. And when we just dissected, we did a rejection analysis, dissected what was going wrong. And it was the same issue. It was like the behavioral question issue. And so oftentimes it's the same for everybody. So yeah, but keep, be accountable yourselves as well, and see and let us know, hey, I have a job interview coming up. Can we do an extra mock interview, or whatever the case is, right? Because we won't always be able to keep tabs and know, okay, you have this amount of interviews coming up. All right, so
this is still pretty rough. I just kind of started this the other day.
no worries, no worries. The rougher, the better. Okay. Any specific one you want me to take a look at?
Not, I don't think so. Well, actually, the last one I'm kind of stuck on because it doesn't follow the star setup, I think.
The why?
Yeah.
We do. 1 second. Because I want to get scrappy here. I want to be able to type some stuff out too. Yeah, the why one is interesting, and this is important for everyone. Yeah, you don't really need to follow the star format for why. I like the way you're starting, by the way. The way you should answer the why, very simple, is say why you like the company, why you think you can add value, and why the company can add value to you. Now, these two are the most important, and people tend to forget, right? So basically, look at it this way. The concept is called give and take. If you show up to the interview with Netflix and you're like, hey, I want to work for Netflix because I can get paid 500 grand, I can work from home, and I can, put Netflix on my resume, they're going to be like, dude, what the hell, right? You're just giving at that point. Or sorry, you're just taking, right? And so the ratio of 2 to 1 is a lot better. You can take and say, hey, I want to work for Netflix because, big data sets, interesting problem to solve, right? And love using Netflix, right? So that is a much better way to, take in this kind of answer. Now, why you like the company, right? That again, it could be, I love their personalized machine learning algorithms and the fact that they're working on XYZ, and I know they use, et cetera, et cetera. They use AWS to do, XYZ in this role. So obviously this, by the way, you like doing your research on the company itself becomes very, very, very apparent. So that's why it's like, the way I want you to think about this is I'm giving you guys frameworks, right? Because these answers are going to change based on the company, right? It has to, right? Not everybody's going to use AWS. Not everybody's going to use personalized machine learning algorithms to recommend shows and movies. But the framework is what I want you guys to take away from this kind of question, because you can apply it to any company that you apply to. And then why you think you can add value. To me, this is the most important one. It's like, hey, I've been a BIE for 5 years, and have worked with data science teams, I think I can help them, you know, with X initiative, right? Whatever the initiative is in the job description, for example. Any questions so far? Because again, I don't want you to get stuck on like, hey, we have to do a star format. What you really should be doing here is painting a picture of why you guys are the perfect marriage. But again, the give and take ratio should be 2 to 1, if you want to think about it that way. Chris, question for you. Why Netflix? Were you looking at a job description there?
That was just kind of what I picked off the top of my head. It really, any entertainment companies like Netflix would be awesome to work at.
Let's take a look because I want to show you guys how you guys should be going about this. What role are you applying? Data engineer?
Senior data engineer, ideally.
Nice, L5. Yeah, Netflix only has 1 level. I know that's not true. They have like, anyway, let's see. I want to show you guys how you guys should go about this, like in a very doctor format. So I don't know who I might have talked to Shelby about this. So you're going through this, the why Netflix thing. Now, the other thing you should do, and of course, have your behavioral question stories, have your why now, like who are you, why this company, right? Have all that, right? This should be, you know, 4 to 5 sentences. We'll get that. The other thing I want you guys to get good at is ask questions. Now, I mean this in 2 ways. I mean this at the end of the interview, but then also in the interview, like in the middle of the interview. And so what I mean by that is, let me give an analogy. I don't know if I said this to you, Shelby, already, but the reason you want to, well, first off, when you go through an interview and at the end of the interview, they ask, hey, what questions do you have for me? If you don't have any questions, they're going to be like, this guy doesn't care, right? So have questions at the interview, right? Have whatever, 3 to 7, I would say. It's important and it shows them that you care, right? That's really it. This one right here, though, this is the part that people forget, right? This one is what you're doing there is you're triggering a conversation. So you're triggering something called likability bias, because at the end of the day, remember, they're going to hire people that they like, right? And so you want to be able to show them that you've seriously researched your job that you're applying to without just telling them. So for example, the way I would go about it is I would dissect every single sentence in this job description and come up with questions. Right. So with 200 million members in over 190 countries, blah, 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 blah. Netflix is reinventing, revolutionizing our journeys. So this is the little intro there. You can ask questions on that too. Oh, what's the goal? Is the goal to get to a billion? Right? Has it been growing? You know, what's the growth rate? Has it ever slowed down? When it did plateau, how did it go up? Right? So I can ask 5 questions just based on that one sentence there. And so I call it the curiosity bias. Like up your curiosity, because that's the stuff. Look at it this way, like they're hiring you for engineer and analyst roles, right? So what they're looking for is this person analytical? That's what they're looking for, right? Like that's, yes, they're going to test you on SQL, they're going to test you on AWS, on Python. Again, that's the yes or no answer, right? That's easy because you either know you did it right or you did it wrong. But with this one, they're looking for subliminal clues that you're an analytical person. And so the way you ask questions throughout the interview, or even at the end, or just have a conversation, will let them know you're analytical. So it's like, this is the one I think I told to Shelby. It's like if I go to a bar and I go up to a girl and I'm like, hey, trust me, like I'm good looking. That's weird, right? I can't just go up and do that. You just have to show them. So you can't go up and say, hey, I'm analytical. You have to go up to them and or show them that you are analytical in the actual conversation itself, right? So any questions so far? tend to go on tangents and ramble a little bit. Any questions?
So showing that you are analytical also goes for a data engineer, or does it is it very important for just a data
Oh
analyst?
yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's important for all the roles because at the end of the day, right? And by the way, I don't know, Brad, you probably got to this section, the data modeling section, right? And if you think about the data modeling section, yes, you need to know the technical parts of knowing how to take a Lambda and AWS pipeline to create some sort of data model, whatever, right? Some sort of Postgres, Redshift, it doesn't matter, right? You need to know that part. But you as a data engineer, what they don't really tell you is that you are the bridge to the full-on technical team and the business team, right? That's where a data engineer kind of differs from like a software engineer. A software engineer is like heads down, they're coding, and they still need to understand the business, don't get me wrong. But a data engineer, if you don't understand the business, you're going to create the wrong tables, the unoptimized tables, right? So if you think about this section, for anyone that hasn't gone there yet, when you think about the data modeling section, we make these questions very vague on purpose. Because when you get to a question like Instagram, you have one question. We gotta check that bug in the when we have this thing right here, right? This is such a vague question. Now it's a data engineer problem because we have to find facts and dim tables. But like, you know, thank you, Daniel. But like, think about how, like, let's go. All right, let's do this, Rad. I'm gonna pick on you a little bit because you have the camera on. How would you answer this question?
So
Let's say we're in a real interview.
sure. So it's a created data model to allow scientists to come up with the friend recommendation engine. So obviously we would need to work with the data of there's a who and there's what they have been watching. So I would start with data table. There's the table for users, everything that goes into users in terms of demographic, because that may become important for like people tend to go for like things that are for old people, maybe
Yeah,
something.
and so what Rad is doing there, and there's nothing wrong with it, because I know Rad's gonna kill it on this round, but what Rad is doing there, he's jumping in and he's answering the question. That is the last thing any of you should do. Because here's the thing, this question can mean a lot of things. A friend recommendation model, right, for Instagram, right? So what's the goal, right? How do we define a friend? How do we get a friend? Is this at the beginning of Facebook or the end of Facebook, right? There's so many questions I can ask. How are we defining, how are we defining success in our model, right? Is this something for data scientists to use? Right? So you see how I just asked 10 questions there? That's how you can come off analytical without going up to the girl and being like, hey, I'm analytical. Trust me. It's like, no, show them you're analytical by asking them questions. And so for anyone that's gone through like the SQL training yet or has done a SQL interview, there's a reason we say ask and clarify questions in the beginning. Because what you're doing there is you're triggering to the interviewer. Like this is where I think LeetCode fails a lot of people, because LeetCode has kind of created that environment of like, you see a problem, you just hands down and try to fix it. But in reality, in an interview, they want you to communicate and have that conversation with them, right? And this is like when I used to interview at Lyft and Amazon, this was one of the actual rubrics that we had for grading. It's like, did they take feedback, right? Were they able to take hints, right? That was a big thing in our grading rubric. And so that's why we recommend like, hey, ask questions and clarify in the beginning. For something like data modeling, same thing, but it's even more intense. It's ask a lot of questions. Because again, a question like this is really vague on purpose. right? It's like saying like I think I was working with somebody the other day who was like he was applying for DoorDash and it was like we see a drop, we see a 20% drop or 30, we see a 30% drop in conversion for DoorDash. How would you fix it? Right? Now here's the good, by the way, not to go on too much of a tangent. The thing all of you should do before you go on an interview, download the app and use it. Use it for like a whole week. Like I would order DoorDash every day for the week before I get the DoorDash interview. Because then you get to see all the metrics and you get to start thinking, oh wait, what are possible drop off points for the um for that 30% drop off conversion. So anyone else want to take a stab at this? Now that you know I'm saying ask a lot of questions, who wants to take a stab at answering this kind of question?
Now I know what to do, but I can wait for someone else.
Shelby, how about you? I know you have interviews coming up. Did you go?
I will ask what the conversion mean. What does conversion mean over here? Is that it's not specific? Is that currency or what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. What other questions? What does conversion mean? What other questions can you ask?
I will ask if has there been any change that led to the 30% drop conversion? Assuming
Yeah.
that they will define what the conversion is.
Let's just say a conversion. Okay, let's role play this. Let's just say I say, hey, this drop on conversion is number of orders.
I will ask okay, number of order, then that will allow me to ask the next question. I might ask the next question on the maybe on the driver profile or the customer profile. So I will ask if there has been an price increase in the system. Price increase. Yes.
What do you mean in system?
Price increase in the for example, they charge a fee to deliver the food to the customer.
Nice. Yep. And that's and by the way, I can tell who answered that, by the way. Can't see. Well, whoever answered that, whoever answered that, good stuff. I can tell you order on DoorDash, right? Because that is the thing that DoorDash might do is they might increase their fee, right? And so we actually had that in Seattle. Now they have like a mandatory like $6 fee for anyone that orders. So it's insane. Like a McDonald's burger is like $20. But anyway, yeah, that's exactly, the benefit of it's called dog fooding is you're playing with your own product basically. And so you can go in and dog food other companies' products and actually deal with it to figure out where the drop off points are. So Chris brought up a very good point right there. What's the time frame, right? Is this a 30% drop off week over week, year over year, right?
They could also be talking about the business and not necessarily the customers. Like
Yep.
the companies using DoorDash. What is the conversion rate for them?
Yep, exactly. And going back to like to that point to kind of marry the price increase in the business, is it the restaurant that increased price? Which then kind of begs the question, is it in a certain city? Is it in all cities? Have we analyzed mobile versus or Android versus iOS, right? You can slice and dice the data left and right, but my whole point is here. This is where what tactics were implemented previously to increase. Yep, exactly. You can go as deep as you want. Now, obviously, if you spend the first 20 minutes asking questions, don't go extreme, right? So if this is a 30-minute interview, you might use the first 5 minutes. If this is a 1 hour interview, you might use the first 10 to 15 minutes, right? So, be smart about how much and how deep you go. And genuinely don't ask questions, just ask questions. Ask questions that understand the context here. And so, do you see how this, we're no longer telling the girl, hey, I'm analytical. We're actually showing them how we would solve this problem in real life. And the worst thing you can do is just jump in and start answering the question. By the way, the people that have this kind of problem the most are the people who have years of experience. So the ones who have 5, 10, 15 years of experience, they tend to use their past experience and they think that that is how it always must be. That's not true. So somebody who's actually, fully transitioning, you guys are actually going to be able to learn this and you don't have to unlearn bad habits basically. Anything going on the higher level, economy, layoffs, unemployment rate. Yep, good question, Isaiah. And that's why, by the way, that's where like that kind of question, the time frame is so important because if it was a 30% drop off week over week, then chances are, unless something drastic happened in the economy, right? Chances are it might be something internal to DoorDash. So yeah, good question. What about using NLP? Elaborate, Chris. Neurolinguistic?
Yeah, exactly. Creating that kind of subconscious connection with people and using keywords to engage them. Like,
You
is that
can, but that's kind of what I guess going a little more ninja, that's kind of what we do when we tell you to do certain things. So for example, when we tell Rad to say something like, hey, I've developed number in order to save 100 hours per week, right? We're subliminally telling them like, by the way, you can pay me 2, 3, 400 grand a year because I'm gonna save you 4 million bucks a year with one task, right? That's kind of what you're subliminally doing. And that's why, again, that's why be very, very aware. Just putting AWS and GCP up there does not do anything. Everybody's doing that. If you can actually show them that in your bullet points, that's where and the Nod and Asmat will work with you on that, but that's where the real lift happens. Any other questions? Did I miss anything? Price increase, people see that's another total. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, that's another, Isaiah brought up a good point. He was saying like, when people see, people see a $70 order and then they close the app. So this is what's called a funnel analysis, right? And so again, if you use the DoorDash app and really pay attention to everything you're clicking on, you realize how many points there are. There's opening, there's scrolling, there's typing in restaurant, they're scrolling there, they're picking food, right? You're accepting order, you're tipping, et cetera, right? So this becomes what's called a funnel analysis because there's every step of the way. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. People started dropping off when they had to pick food. So now that tells you maybe it's just a software bug, right? So even having granular data like that, you can ask them a question. It's like, hey, how granular of a data point do we have, right? Because so the way I like to think about that is like micro versus macro. This is macro in terms of like, hey, is there something wrong in the city? Did it get affected by restaurant? Did it get affected by phone? Now this is micro. Now we're going into the actions of what the actual person are doing, and we can go and dissect, what actually can be the bottleneck, right? So any questions there? Cool. Prime members. Yep, exactly, Isaiah. Cool. So hopefully that was helpful there. I know we kind of went on a tangent and started talking about data modeling questions, but I think that the way of thinking, and by the way, my whole point in doing that little exercise is that I can go through every single line of this job description and come up with 2 or 4 questions, right? So requires building systems to process data efficiently and modeling the data to power analytics. What kind of analytics are you doing? What's the metric? What's your KPIs? What's the current process that you currently have? Are you on AWS? What needs to become more efficiently? Right? So I just came up with 4 questions on one line, and I can do that. And you guys should do that, especially for roles that you care about. It's worth the effort, right? Every single line, just go through it, almost dissect it like a doctor, right? Because here's the thing, this is the easy part, right? Great. Do you know Java, Python, and SQL? That's what you guys are studying, right? So that's kind of the easy part. But this, for the behavioral question round specifically, like remember, a human wrote this. So you're getting the insight as to what they're looking for with every single word. And so do not ignore this. People get overwhelmed on this, but it's not relevant to this is relevant to the technical rounds. This is relevant to the behavioral rounds. Yes, Red?
One thing that keeps me from maybe unconsciously from doing this too much is that the relevant part to get about what needs to the bullet points. I can recognize that somebody who knew this specific role wrote it, but some of the other parts about, especially on the top, I keep imagining that somebody not very relevant to the position just copied and pasted it. And maybe if I say what needs to be done more efficiently, maybe I'm asking the wrong question or from the wrong person, because that was just copied and pasted from somebody, and they don't have an
Yeah,
answer.
well, when you think about the personality types of who you're talking to, right? So like if you have a SQL round, right, then that's going to be this right here. But then when you have the behavioral question round, which is what we're talking about today specifically, right, that's probably going to be with a hiring manager or product manager. It might be a lead, it might be an engineer lead, but that engineer, has both sides of the brain, right? They're technically savvy, but also they're lead because they can communicate, they can lead a team, they can cross collaborate, right? They can talk to stakeholders, they can create budget requirements and business requirements. And so they might have been the person that wrote this part, right? And so that's, again, going back to like, because the problem most engineers do, they're in the behavioral questions, is that they go very technically heavy when it's not necessarily what they're looking for. Now, again, there are cases where, you can have like a product based, you can have a product interview round, right? That is something where, not because we don't have enough time to go into it, but that's where they give you like these brain teasers, like, if you were to solve, et cetera, with AWS, how can you do it? This is more aligned with like system design though. So you'll know before you go into the interview, like how technical you need to be ready to go. But specifically for these, I want to talk about behaviorals more because that's where I see a lot of engineers, um, you know, kind of mess up because they'll get a question asked like this, and then they'll be like, oh, well, I'll try to use, this AWS tool to do XYZ. And it's like, oh, they're asking you a business question there, not a technical question. So to be able to dissect and delineate between the two is a skill within itself. Anything else, guys? Cool. Anything you want? Is Nanad on the call? I don't think he's on the call. I don't think Asmat. Asmat, anything you want to add? Or Nanad as well?
Yep, I'm here, Chris.
Cool. Awesome. If you have any other questions, go in the chat. Otherwise, I'll kind of keep it short for now.
First, if there's nothing else, I want to ask something. There has been a question that I ask at the end of the interview, and
Yeah.
I've been asking it for data analyst positions, and it has been always working for me. But I don't know what equivalent one would be for a data engineer. And this has been, I would ask them, if you hired somebody like me today and they had all of the accesses that they needed to have and all of the internal knowledge about, where are the tables, all of the data that they need to access, what would be the first problem that you wanted them to sink their teeth into? So what is this first problem that you wanted them to solve? Because usually the behavior questions come in the middle or sometimes before some other interviews, and that gives me time. Not only tells them that I care, but also it gives me time to kind of guess what would be the next questions in the interview.
You can definitely ask it for data engineering or anything. Yeah, you can absolutely, because it goes back to like this concept right here. Because again, I don't want you to stress too much about the question. I want you to focus on the frameworks, right? The frameworks of thinking is what's important. And so that goes back to this right here that we talked about. It's giving and taking, right? Like you want to be able to give more than you take. And so right here, when you ask a question like that, I love that question, right? The other way you can frame that question is like, you know, how can I make the biggest impact right away, right? You can, the reason I love those questions is because you can ask that for any position, right? And so you can ask, what would be the first problem I would work on? What's the biggest impact I can make right away? You know, what does a good X look like, right? What does a good data engineer look like, right? What does a good senior data engineer? What does a good BIE? What does a bad one look like, right? So again, the word, like, I hate the questions of like, hey, like, what does your day-to-day look like? That, or like, hey, like, how do you like, you know, working here? You can ask it, but those are more like supplemental, because those are more like, oh, again, those are more like you're taking, like you want to know. And again, I'm not saying don't ask it. You should ask it because you want to make sure you end up in a company that you're happy with. But when you ask these questions, what happens in their mind is like, oh, he's already thinking about how he can add value, not how he can get value, right? Because remember, every business owner will tell you this. They will happily pay you, you know, 10% of whatever it is you bring in. If you figure out how to make a company $100 million, I'd be shocked if there's a business owner that didn't want to give you, you know, $1 million, right? So that's the mindset of you giving back value is really how you have to approach those questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, guys? I'll end it off with answering this last one. A software engineer interview can turn into a software engineer one. For some roles, yeah. For some senior data engineer roles, but that will happen during the Python round. That will happen when they do algorithmic leak code Python type of questions. Other than that, it won't get too hectic. That's really, you know, now again, can you ask any question? Yeah. Oh, 100%. All of you should be asking the recruiter what to expect on the interview. They'll happily tell you, give you some hints. Maybe 10% of the time they won't tell you, or they'll just not respond in time. But you should 100% ask them, like, hey, by the way, how can I prepare the best? And they'll send you materials too, by the way. Like 50% of the time they have materials to send to you, but you have to ask. Anyway, I have to drop off too. Thank you guys. If you guys have any more questions, just send it in the chat and we'll go from there. Later, guys.